Hey guys, quick heads up before I start the video. The link down below takes you to my Patreon, where you can download the project files for this video. Also gain access to my premium tutorials and in-depth courses where we build games together from start to finish. Check out my Patreon below, gain direct access to years of experience so that you can start working on your dream game tomorrow. Hello everybody and welcome back to a new episode of my multiplayer Bean Battle Royale tutorial series. So let's do a quick little recap of where we are at so far. So in the last episode we set up that parachuting logic, but I just want to go over everything. So first of all, if we click here to play with 2 players, then the game automatically recognizes that we met the minimal threshold. So we got 2 out of 2 players and then we can start. Then the automatic match countdown starts. And then once it hits 0, we basically enter into the airplane. We then see that the match countdown is gone, but on the top right here, we still see that we do see 2 out of 2 players. But at this point, we should change that for it to say something like 2 players left, because now the match has started, so these guys need to start eliminating each other. We can then also jump out of the airplane and use the parachute, which we set up in the last video. Then when the player basically hits the ground, the parachute automatically cuts off. And I can also just release spacebar to drop a little bit and hold spacebar again. So here we go. I am almost at the ground and the parachute automatically cuts off. And then we can also do it with this guy, so he can jump out, parachute a little bit, let it go, and parachute a little bit. And there we go. So so a couple of things that we want to work on in this video. Well, we want to get that count on the top right to be adjusted. And then I think that we just want to start adding some UI. Now, another thing that we also are going to do is that, I'm not sure if you guys just saw it, but when I jumped out of that airplane with the server here on the right, then the client here on the left could not see the guy at a certain distance anymore. And that has to do with the net culling distance. So on the clients, replication is optimized, and when actors are too far apart from each other, replicated actors, then something like culling distance applies unless you make an actor always relevant. So when setting up the airplane 2 videos ago, we also made sure that the airplane was always relevant, so that no matter how far the airplane was away from the clients could still see it. Now on the server, everything is always relevant to it, because the server obviously is responsible for replicating data down to all of the clients. So the server can always see everything basically. So what do I also want to change here? I also want to make sure that the client sees the characters at all times. So let's actually do that first. So we're just simply going to open up the core character here. And then in the class default settings of the core character, all we have to do is simply click on always relevant is true, so that these characters can see each other also at great distances. And then we're just gonna straight hop into this player count. So it displays 1 out of 2 players, 2 out of 2 players, then the match starts. But what we want is that inside of the game state here, so if we head over to the gameplay, game state, this class, then we see that we get that countdown, and then at some point the countdown hits 0 seconds, which spawns us in the airplane and starts the match. But at that countdown, we also want to change that UI on the top right to display the amount of players. So if we find our player count widget, which is located over here under game widgets, widget blueprint player count, then we can open this guy up. And then we can take a look at the graph where we see that we have a function here on the left. So if we double click that function, then this is the function that is bound to the text. So in this function, what we're going to do is that we're simply going to drag out of the game state, and we're going to say match countdown, get match countdown. And then what we're going to do is some logic here that in case the match countdown is equal or less, just to be sure, than 0, then we basically want to display just the player amount and not the player amount / players. So if it is false, that means we're still counting down. Then we want to display 2 out of 2 players. But if it is true that we are at the 0 countdown, that means the match has started, is we're going to then right click and type in string append. And we're going to plug this guy in here. And in that case, we simply want to say the current amount of players. And then that one goes in here. And then here we will just do spacebar survivors. So survivors left, basically. So then if we hit compile and save, then that should automatically fix itself. So let's test it real quick. So what did we see? We saw quickly that it said survivors. So why did it say that so quickly? That is because the match countdown is probably set to 0 by default. Oh no, it is set to -1 by default. So what we're going to have to do is actually say if this is actually equal to 0, then we want to do this logic. Let's go ahead, compile and save, hit play. There we go. So it says 1 out of 2, 2 out of 2. Then we just get the countdown, so we'll just wait for this. There we go. So right now it displays 2 survivors, so that's great. Alright, now that we got this out of the way, this little cleanup, I just want to basically continue with extra user interface. So actually the first widget that we want to be setting up is something like a health widget. That is for the characters that they see on their own screen representing their health. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the game widgets. And then here we see all of the UI stuff. So this is our heads-up display wrapper essentially. So this in where we basically put our health and all that stuff. So now let's make an actual widget here. If we right click, widget blueprint, user widget. Let's call it WB Healthbar. And then if we open this guy up, then we are just going to start to design it. So if we open up the panel here, then let's see, let's get ourselves a progress bar, which we can use for health. We are then going to rename this and let's call it health bar PB, which stands for progress bar. And then we're going to compile save. We're going to hit fill screen and change it to desired on screen. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap this guy with a size box to give it a size. So here we see size box. Now the width is going to be something like 250, I guess. And the height, let's try 40. It's a bit tall. 25. Okay, so to get an idea of what this looks like, we're going to go into the gameplay HUD, user created, and let's just drag this into the screen. So here we go, and size it to the content. Yeah, okay, so we want it to be a bit longer. So let's do 300 and let's do 30 high. Compile save. Then we can delete it over here. Then inside of this health bar, we also want to display some text. But before we do that, let's click on the health bar and then set up some default settings over here. So yes, we want it to go from left to right, the percentage. Let's just put it at something like 25. Oh, so that instead of typing 25, so we have to put it to 2.5. So there we go. And then what we want is that, well, obviously we want to change the color a little bit. So it needs to be representing health. So let's make it something like red. Here we go. And then we want to put the health as a text in here as well. You could also put it above, but we're going to put it in here. So we're going to right click the health bar and then we're going to wrap it with something called an overlay, which we can find over here. And then with the overlay here, we need to select the health bar again, put it full screen again. And then in the overlay, we're going to drag some text that's going to overlay on the health bar. Now this text, we want it to say something like 100 out of 100. And then it needs to be a lot smaller. So let's try 14. And then we need to center it, something like this. And we want to offset it a little bit. So on the left, we're going to give it some padding. Let's say 10 padding. There we go. Then the preview of the health bar, we could change it to say 0.7. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of what we want it to look like. Now this text has to be editable. So for that, we need to make it a variable. We're going to call it the health. Let's actually call it health text or health amount text. Health amount text. And then we make this be variable. And there we go. Okay, so that's basically it for our health. So now that we got this one out of the way, then we can add it here to our gameplay HUD. So we can grab the health bar, put it somewhere over here, size it to content, reset its size over here, and anchor it to the top left. Or maybe you want it in the bottom. Let's actually do it in the bottom. So you're going to click anchor, hold control, click the bottom one, click anchor, hold shift, click the bottom one. Then it's nice and centered. Then we just want to put it up a little bit. So for the Y, we're going to type in -50 to get it up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now that we got the health bar installed, yeah, let's actually start working on the health so that we can make the health functional and that players can actually take damage. Okay, so now that it comes to setting up the health, so now we're going to open up the character, and then inside of the character, we're first of all going to need to make all the health stuff. So to do that, let's click the once parachute first, and we're going to put this into the parachute category, and then is parachuting, we're also going to put in the parachute category. There we go. And then next up, we're going to make a new variable, and we're going to call it health. Now this has to be of the type float, so health has to be a decimal number here, and then we're also going to duplicate it, and we're going to call this one max health, and then we're going to put the health inside of a category as well. So let's just call it the health category actually. So here we go, this guy goes in the category. Now both of these need to be replicated, so the max health here, we're going to set that one to replicate it, and the health, we're going to set that to rep notify, so that whenever the health changes, we can actually do some logic there. We might not need that, then we change it later, but let's set to rep notify for now, so we get this function for whenever the health changes. Then the max health, we're going to set it to a default variable of, let's say, 100, and the same for the health. So also let's put that to 100. So now somehow we need to get this health that lives inside of the character all the way over to the widget of this specific user to display it over here in this widget health bar over here. So to do that, what we're going to do first is set up the widget to have a reference of our character, because then once the widget has a reference of the character, that means that the widget can actually read data from the character, and one of that data that we want to read is that health. So inside of the health bar widget, we're going to click on the graph, and then we're going to get our event construct over here. Check out Cactus Center right now on Steam in Early Access. It's a very fun multiplayer video game, cheaper than the Starbucks coffee. So if you want to have a good time with your friends or strangers, click that link down below, and I appreciate every single one of you, and enjoy the rest of the video. Bye! If you don't have it in the graph, you can also simply type in event construct. And then what we want to do is we want to add a variable here, and this variable is going to contain that reference to our character. So we're literally just going to call it character_ref, which means reference. Then as the type, we're simply going to type in the name of the character. So we're going to call it BP core character. And that will be over here. We want to get an object reference. Then we're going to compile and save. And that's it for this one. So this will basically contain the data of the character. So by default, if we select, even though this is a reference of the character, if we select it and scroll down, we see that the value is set to none. So if you were to just read data out of here, you would get an error called trying to access none. So we need to basically set this reference first of all so that it is valid. So to do that, you could do it in many different ways. You could basically have the widget here on event construct casting to the character, and then basically setting itself with a reference of it. So to do that, you would type something like get player pawn, and then you would basically just cast to the BP core character, and then you would basically set this reference with this reference that comes out of here. But the danger of doing it this way is that the widget might construct before the character is ready. So the danger here is that you might do this logic, but you don't actually have a character yet. So then you could basically run delay logic here to try again until you get a valid character. Or what you could also do is that instead of just basically implementing the health bar by default inside of the HUD here, you could also make sure that the character actually sets up that health bar widget to be populated on the screen of the player. Or another option that you can do is that you can have the character simply just send a reference to this health bar widget whenever the character spawns. So that's what we're going to go for right now. So it is important to keep in mind characters exist on the server and on all clients. So remember, if we have a server and then we have client 1 and then we have client 2, then all these guys have a character. So each of them have one character, and then we got character 2, and then we got character 3. All right. So both the server has all 3 of these characters, the client has all 3 of the characters, and client 2 has all 3 of the characters. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to get a begin play event, and a begin play will literally fire here for player 1, player 2, player 3. So it will fire 3 times here, 3 times here, 3 times here. So what we want to do is that when it comes down to this widget and giving this widget a valid reference, then we only want the client itself to send a widget to send a reference of the character to its own widget. So what that means is if the server connects with player 1, which is the server character, then we want only this one to set up the widget. If this client connects, client 2, then we want this guy to only set it up with this character. And client 2 here, so this is player 3, but client 2, we want that one to set it up with player 3 only. So to do that, we need to each have them set up their own local version of the character. So to do that, we can right click and then we can type in is locally controlled. So right now, if we basically branch off of here, and then if we were to print string hello, so print string, then we can see how many times hello is printed. But before we test that, let's just plug in the hello like this to simulate this scenario. So I'm going to test with 2 players. So it will basically now simulate this scenario. So what we're going to see is we're going to see that hello is going to be set once and twice by the server and once and twice by the client. So let's put this on the screen for 15 seconds and hit play. So here we go. We see here that the server says hello twice, so hello, hello, and then the client says hello, hello. So in order to stop that, we can basically hook up this logic with the is locally controlled, go off of the true, and now you will see that only the server says it for themselves and the client says it for themselves. So if we hit play now, we see that the server simply says hello once for themselves and the client says hello once for themselves. So there we go. So now that we know that we are on the local version of each of these players, it basically looks like this. And then we can have the local player basically get a reference of this Healthbar. And then from there, the local player can basically set this reference to the reference of itself. So how can we do that? Well, it can be done in many ways. Now that we exist locally, we know that locally we got one HUD on our screen containing one Healthbar. So one way to do it is to simply type in get all widgets of class. And then the widgets of class could be the Healthbar widget. So this would be Healthbar. And then out of here, we could simply type in get, and then we would get the first widget that we find. Or we would simply just for each loop, and then for each widget of the Healthbar, we would simply do like, we would get the character ref, or then in this case, we would set the character ref. And then we could set the character ref to ourselves. Now, another way that we could set something like this up is that we know that we created this widget. Well, we created the gameplay widget inside of the player controller. So what we see over here is that we got gameplay, and then we got the gameplay player controller over here. And we know that this widget set up our HUD, and that this widget has a reference of the HUD class. So what you could also do, instead of running this type of logic, but this logic is very simple to use, we could also simply inside of the character say get player controller to get the player controller of this character. And yes, it says index 0, but if we get the local version and then do this, then it will get the player controller that corresponds to this character. In case that you do not run the local, then you would typically just type in get controller. And then get controller gets the controller of itself without the 0 index. So this is always a safer one to use when working inside of the character. And then out of here, we could then cast to the gameplay PC. So we could cast to this guy. Then we know that the gameplay PC contains the gameplay HUD, the HUD reference. So this is what we called it, get HUD. So if we check inside of the PC, we see we set up the widget called widget blueprint gameplay HUD, but we called it widget blueprint HUD as a reference. But this reference contains the reference to gameplay HUD. So here we could get the HUD, and then from the HUD we could then get the Healthbar. How is it that we can get the Healthbar from the HUD? Well, inside of the HUD, we set up the Healthbar. And then here we could drag off and set the character reference. So this is another way to do it. And then the character reference will be ourself as the character. So this is also how we can try that instead of using this logic. But obviously this is a lot simpler, a lot more easy to use. Instead of the for each loop even, you could just get the one at index 0, since you know that you only have one Healthbar on your screen here anyways. So there we go. And then basically, now that we did this, we then set the character reference here. So next up is that we basically want to go back to our health bar, and then we want to bind this text to the value of the health, and we want to also bind the health bar itself to the value. So first of all, let's start off with this health variable here. By default, let's make it say something like this. We're just going to have it be a little dot so that we can see that it actually changes to 100. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to select the text and click on create binding. Now this binding, we're going to rename it a little bit so that we don't have this ugly name. Something like this is fine. And then inside of the binding, so bindings, they happen on tick. So on tick, we're going to be able to read the value from the character. So inside of here, we can basically drag off of this character reference and then type in get health. But then what we also want to type in is get max health. Because we want to display 100/100 and then 80 out of 100. Then we're going to type in string append. We're going to plug this string append into here. We're going to put the actual text in here. We're then going to do a little dash, and then the next one, put the max health in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit play and see what happens. So we hit play. We see that we have 100 out of 100 on both the client and the server here. Everything works fine. Then if I hit close, yeah, so everything works fine. To be sure that this reference is not already ticking before we basically set it, we can also right click it, convert it to a validated reference, so that only in the case that the reference has actually here been set to a correct reference, it will start to execute this logic. This way we can basically make it secure and make sure that we do not run any errors. So there we go. Now we got the health bound basically. Now we just need to bind this health bar as well. So with the health bar selected, we're going to be binding the percentage here. So we're going to click it, click create binding, yet again rename this. So let's just call it get health bar PB as a nicer name. Then in here once more, we're going to get the character reference, convert it to a validated get. Yet again, we're going to get the max health. So this one, and then we're going to get the health, so the current health. And then in order to get the percentage here, we're going to have to divide the current health by the max health. Go ahead and plug this in over here and hit play. There we go. So now the health bar is completely full. So let's say that the health is not completely full. So we'll change the health inside of the character here to something like 55. And let's see if it's properly working. We hit play, we see that it's at 55 out of 100 and that the health bar is at half its health bar on both the server and the client. So that's fine. We can then go ahead and delete this logic and delete this. And then we can basically make this a bit nicer and select it all, collapse it to a function and call it init underscore health bar. So we call it init health bar. If we open this up, we can straighten up these lines. And then also functions, you can also put them in categories. So for the parachute here, we can also put that one in the parachute category, and the init health bar can go in the health category. Hit compile, save, and there we go. I'm going to change the health back to 100 yet again. Oh, and one little last thing that we might want to do is if we hit play, we see that the health displays 100.0 and 100.0. So if we want to make that a nice clean amount, then we can go over to this function. So to do that, we can select this, put it a bit to the right, then drag off of the health, and we can type in something called truncate, and then plug this in over here. So, and then for the max health, we can also truncate. Plug it in over here. And then when truncating, we can actually remove all of this. So out of here comes an integer. We'll plug this in here and plug this in here actually. So this way we can truncate. If we then hit play, we'll see that it becomes a clean number. So it's now 100 out of 100 on both the server and the client instead of 100.0, 100.0. Alright guys, that's it for this video. In the next video we're going to be working on actual damage so that the beans can start killing each other and damaging and perhaps even getting damage from the world. This is it for this video guys. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe. Comment down below. Appreciate all of you guys watching this series of mine, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!